Okay, so before we begin the exercise, we're going to go over materials. So that is your palette right there. It's a cup of water. You have some brushes. You're going to need a Sharpie marker too. And then you've got a palette knife there as well. So you want to go ahead and take your brushes out of the plastic wrap. And you're going to go ahead and write your name on those brushes. Those brushes are yours for the semester, and they're also yours to take care of. So I would think it's a good thing to write your first name and last name. I'm doing it multiple times on the same brush. And there. So I'm smoothing out the bristles on there. I'm making sure they're all going the same direction. A couple hairs might fall out, that's okay. That's a palette knife right there. And that's how you flex it. You don't want to flex it more than that, and you don't want to bend it. It's not a shanking tool. It is a palette knife used for mixing. So this is the palette setup that you're going to have. You're going to have white and various amounts of black. And it's hard to see the black on that palette because the palette's black, but I've taken a little drop of black and I'm mixing it into one of my whites. So it looks like I have 6 little pools of white, and then I have 3 pools of black on the opposite side. And you're going for a value scale here, and it's going to range from really light, or, well, white, all the way to black. And then there's going to be a whole bunch of variation in between. So again, the first value you're going to use is going to be straight up white. The last value of your scale is going to be straight up black. And this is fast forwarded because there's no way I'm mixing that fast, but I'm adding a little bit more black each time I go to a new kind of pool of paint there. And I have a paper towel on hand, and I'm wiping my palette knife on the paper towel if I have any extra. It's really important that you keep the white pure and that you also keep the one black pure so you don't mix any other colors in with it. And you look and you adjust your values. So you want to make sure that there is a change happening between one value and the next. And your goal is to get an even pacing through your values. And it's important to keep adjusting. You actually do want a decent amount of paint on there. So for each puddle, it's like one big full squirt of paint there. About the size of a quarter or a little bit larger. And then the palette knife does make this horrible squeaky noise. After a while, like, you just kind of ignore it, or at least I do. And you're using it, kind of dragging it sideways to blend it. You're not going to overflex that knife. You're just going to, you can see there's almost like a spatula paper towel in my other hand there. And I always manage to get paint all over my hands. That's one of the downsides to painting. But the paint we are using is non-toxic, so it shouldn't hurt you, and it does wash off eventually. Okay, here's what the palette looks like when you're ready to paint on your paper. You have a range from white to black in 10 steps. Alright, so here I'm painting that first square number 1, just straight up white. And I'm using kind of a fat brush or a wide brush. But if you take it sideways and vertically, you'll be able to fill that space. And I don't need it to be perfectly neat. I'm more concerned with the value. And I'm not using a lot of water, very little water on that. So there's value 2. And you can see I'm turning the brush, I'm rotating it to make it fit in those tight areas. You can make a big brush do a skinny mark depending on how you angle the brush. So you're going to keep applying your values from 1 to 10 on there. And you might have to make some adjustments as you go. And sometimes it's easier to work wet into wet, or you might want to let a value dry entirely and then paint over the top of it if your values aren't matching. So I've sped this up so you can see it fast. And you can see I'm making adjustments as I'm going. I got value 4 a little too dark, so I had to add some white to it. And now I'm working in reverse, so from 10 to 9 to 8, and that's the finished piece. And I worked in reverse so I didn't have a muddy brush, a brush that had white on it. So this time I'm taking those same values that I mixed earlier, so I have a range of 10 values, and I'm going to be adding a color to them. So you can use any color you want. I selected purple to be my color. So what that means is you're going to have to add a little bit of purple to each of your value little puddles that you have. The thing is, you start out at the number 1 adding a little bit, and then you add more incrementally as you go through your value scale. So by the time you get to black, you actually use a lot. And I ended up having to pause what I was doing, get up, and keep getting more purple. There are certain colors that you can use a very little bit of them, and they'll kind of tint the whole, tone the whole color. But on certain colors like purple, this purple, it needs a lot to make something turn purple. So for instance, the black just swallows the purple, so you have to use a lot. And you do want your values to look like they have a color to them. And that's how you do tints and shades. They should be colored. Okay, so here's what my value scales is looking like after I've added purple to each of my puddles. And I'm still adjusting things, making sure that the value is right. If you get too much purple or too much color, you're going to have to add a little bit more gray back into it so that there's a nice transition between the values. Okay, so here's what your palette should look like just before you're ready to paint. Okay, so this is me quickly filling in each value step, so 1 through 10 again. And you can see it should be similar to the one above it, except for instead of black and white, it's black and white plus 1 color for that. And you can kind of see that the purple tone is reading. And adjusting it kind of as you go, as needed. So by the time it gets to 10, it should be a purpley black 10. You're going to do the same steps for the last one, except for you're going to use a different color. That means you're going to have to wash your palette, and you're going to have to mix the black and white value scale first, and then add a color to that, which is what I'm going to do after finishing that middle one. So that 10th value has orange in it too. It's orange and black mixed together. So it turns it more into a brown. Okay, so we're going to move to the right of your paper because there's a little section that you've left for yourself, or you should have, and we're going to practice painting edges. So the first one we're going to do is we're going to take whatever paint's on our palette, we're going to take a dark value and kind of a lighter value, and we're going to paint a hard edge, also called like a crisp edge. So I'm going to use two brushes. The first one's going to be a dark value brush, and the second one is a lighter value brush. And I'm looking for a sharp edge where the two values meet. So I'm kind of using the edge of that brush there to kind of push up and make a sharp line, like a table edge or the edge of a paper, something crisp. Now we're going to go below. We're going to do the same thing. So getting a dark value on top, and then having a lighter value meet it, and we're going to get a soft edge. Softer edges are harder to do, but it's the mark of a good artist who can do both soft and hard edges, and you need both in a painting to be successful, especially if you're trying to make a representational painting. Okay, so that's still not a soft edge. I'm loading my brush a little bit with more paint. And I'm going to try and get that edge to be soft. So soft means blurry, kind of like out of focus a little bit. And you have to, in order to make an edge soft, you have to work what's called wet into wet, which means both bodies of paint, the dark paint and the light color paint there, they're both wet. So I'm kind of sweeping that little brush, the one that's the lighter color, has a lighter color on it, and I'm sweeping it into the black so that the edge becomes a little bit blurred. Just like if you were to take a camera lens and kind of get it out of focus. So I'm sweeping back and over that spot until it gets a little blurry. It should look a little blurry compared to the top one. And you can tell it's a little bit more time consuming making a smooth edge or soft edge than a crisp one. So just slightly out of focus. Okay, so what I'm showing you right here is a dry brush technique. You can see the brush stroke really clearly, so you can do experiment with that. It's a style thing too. And then I want to remind you again that you can get a different stroke depending on how you hold your brush. So if you hold your brush wide and drag it sideways, you'll get a wide line. But if you take it down the short side, you can get a very thin line. So even on a bigger brush, you can get a thin and a wide line. You should be able to get both on there. You should experiment with.